Hello and welcome to episode 270 of the Thursday Night Podcast. My name is Brady, joined as always by David, and we are here to put a bow on the Murray State win last Saturday for the Panthers. I will once again drop a handy little link for you to see the Thursday Night post-game show me and David did on Sunday, breaking down that game in a little bit more detail. But before we dive fully into the matchup this weekend at Vanderbilt to close out non-conference play, wanted to open up the floor to you, David, and welcome you to the show, as I have not done yet. Anything left from the Murray State game you wanted to touch on that we didn't necessarily get to in our 30-ish minutes we spent talking about it on Sunday?
Yeah, just, real quick, I think I said at the end of the post-game show that this week I would probably put Brown as the quarterback. I've kind of walked that back a little bit as I've thought through, some of the progressions and stuff like that. We have talked on this show a lot, not specifically about Georgia State, but for other schools, I hate unnecessary quarterback controversy, I think you should just pick a starter and run with it until you absolutely don't have to. And this is going to be a tough week. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think Finley is probably going to end up giving you the best opportunity to win, despite what intrigues me about Brown. And I know that you made a comment last week about, being forward thinking. Brown has eligibility after this year. Finley does not have eligibility. So I think there is something to the fact of, okay, if you want to try to get this guy reps for next year, then yeah, you can definitely just start him and just start him the rest of the way. But I think the difference in both of their stats kind of clouded my judgment a little bit on Sunday. And I just wanted to say that I'm kind of walking back how strongly I was, because I think Brown just looked good in a situation where Georgia State was out-talenting the other team. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that he can't do that, in other games, but you're not going to be playing games where 30 minutes of the game, the game is already well decided and, not really in the balance anymore. So I think I am going to stick with Finley, because I really don't think the 11 for 18 was as bad as it felt coming off of it on Sunday.
I mean, that part of it's still plus more than 60%. So
exactly,
that number in itself, the only reason the stat line looks bad is the picks.
Yeah.
And as we both kind of went to, I don't think either of us put a ton of that on him or entirely on him. This isn't not to pick on him, but the interception Christian threw in the Ole Miss game was 100% on the QB. No one else involved in the play could have changed that outcome. I want to table some of it, even as I've let you set the table for what we're going to talk about here, because I want to bring it up in the context of the Vandy game. But I would just say, for me, it was not a for the future thing in the sense of you're making it about 2026 and beyond. It's more like a yes and. Yes, you get to have the guy of the future, and I think he might be better now. But I think you make an interesting point, and it is certainly worth dissecting later. How they approach the Vandy game, particularly, is how we saw them handle the second half at Ole Miss. Definitely also colors my thinking. Because if you're going to do the same thing, don't really see the point of having Cameron Brown go out there, take unnecessary risk, and just kind of going through the motions is what that offense basically felt like against Ole Miss. Might as well just have it be TJ, get him more reps out there, even if, we'll see what they do, and we'll get into that in more detail later. There's one football thing I wanted to mention, and I put a tweet out kind of spelling out this stat that stood out to me, that through 3 games, Georgia State is about to lap last year's team in tackles for losses defense. And I think that's extra encouraging when you add on the fact that the first few games you played were Ole Miss and Memphis. And it's not the case that it's you have 20 TFL, the number is 20. They have averaging 6.67 through the first 3 games. If it was you had 4 against the first 2 and then you got 12 against Murray State, I'd be pumping the brakes just a bit, because it's all right, that's a bit skewed, the matchup that you had. They actually had the most against Memphis. They had 8 against Memphis and then 6 in each of the other 2 games. It's been pretty consistent. Some of the quarterback pressures and sacks is mixed in there as well, but it's also been on just run plays where it's just guy beating his man right at the point of attack and getting a guy for a 1-yard loss and sending him behind the sticks. That stuff was like entirely missing last year. And they ended up last in the conference, 46 tackles for loss. And so some of the numbers still don't look great. You're still giving up 200 plus on the ground just based on how the Ole Miss game went. You give up 295 in that one. So I still believe, and I feel like this is maybe the third or fourth year since we've been doing this, that I have gone out on a limb for the defense. And 2021, I think, is the only year that it really worked out. But I think this is a good defense. Especially, I think it's a good defensive front. And I think as the competition calms down, which it's still not going to totally do, but it's certainly not going to do until the month of October, because Vandy certainly going to test you in a lot of ways, especially on the ground. I think that the numbers are going to start looking better and better, and that's an actual thing that's going well that I can point to that gives me that thought.
It's one of those things where I think the defense, I can't remember the year, but there was a year that we talked about the defense, and I think it was through the first 4 or 5 games. They were allowing a ton of yards, but they were making the plays, getting off the field sometimes when they needed to via interception or sack.
I'm going to take a stab that this was the 2023, the 4-0 start.
Yeah, I feel like it was, and then it all just kind of fell apart from there. I really do feel like that, because it doesn't, when you look at the overall numbers, it doesn't look like this is a defense that is dominant. It doesn't look like this is a defense that's, you just mentioned the tackles for loss. Well, they still only have 5 sacks, and I know that that's still a better pace than what they were on last year, which is encouraging. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. It's just, I think I agree with you that I think this is a good unit, because I think there's another gear here. You know what I mean? I just think that they haven't
certainly they need to tap into that. Yeah. If they don't also just keep getting better as the season goes on for what they need to improve on, then it's not going to get to that point. I just think that is a possibility. And I think we're in a situation again where I've been wrong before, but I think the defense is going to be the best unit of the team this year, which has not been the case a lot of times for Georgia State. And I think you could point to that being as a reason why they haven't won a Sun Belt title yet, or whatever league they've been in before, because it's you can have a team with a really good offense that if your defense is just not up to snuff, it's going to cost you in those games that matter. Whereas the cliche is true. Defense wins championships. And so, championships maybe seems a bit extreme for the 1 and 2 start and how the teams look so far, but defense wins whatever you want it to win for Georgia State. I think they might need to lean on that group, but I think there's reason to think they can trust them.
I think so. That, like we said in the postgame show, what did they ended up giving up? 21 points? 14 of them really were not allowed. 14 was allowed when the game was not in balance.
They went for 2. So on the last one, it was 13.
That's right. I will shortchange them. So, those were the backups. I'm not going to hold that against them. Yes, there was drives where they moved the ball, but in last year, they're not getting those turnovers on down. They're not turning the ball over, getting that interception. They're not finding ways to just get off the field. And yes, there are things that certainly still need to be cleaned up. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, their penalty yardage from last game starts with, it's in the triple digits. Okay. That's obviously bad, but I really do agree with you that I think the defense is the better side of the ball, because I think it's been the most consistent, which is a crazy thing to say given the point totals allowed by Georgia State so far this year. But I don't hold necessarily that against the defense. I think if there was some better, more fluid offense, they're not allowing 38 points to Memphis. They're not allowing 63 points to Ole Miss. And yes,
the defense only allowed 31 of those against Memphis.
Exactly. Yes, obviously,
and the first
sports,
team
but
defense didn't allow all 63 against Ole Miss.
Right.
They started subbing some guys out. Again, speaking to how they handled that second half in Oxford.
God, that game was very frustrating, but it's okay. We don't have to rehash that.
We're gonna keep bringing it up just because it's gonna keep going back to but why did you do that? I don't know. The other thing I needed to mention, I don't usually comment all that much on the game day stuff. I've got enough on my plate up in the press box and handling game coverage to sweat too much about it, and I'm all for trying things. Georgia State has got to keep trying things to enhance the game experience and get people to want to come back for the party atmosphere. But I think possibly taking it a little bit far, with the live DJ, particularly if the live DJ doesn't seem to know the rules of NCAA football. Because I don't know if that DJ, if he'd covered sports before, he or she, I don't know who the DJ is. I don't need to besmirch their name, even as I am about to, say some words about what could have been improved. I think if they'd covered a sports event before, it would have been a basketball game, because there was constantly playing music basically all the way up to the snap. You see that in basketball games. Like when the Hawks are taking the ball up the court, Oregon will be playing, or they'll be playing some musical little excerpts. That's not a thing in football. It actually can get you in trouble in football if you're playing when the other team is on offense. And we kind of saw that the game before, when the train horn had to go away in timeout because Memphis said, hey, stop playing this when we're on offense. And there were times where, like, even as the ball had already been snapped, there was still some music playing. Mixed in with there being some little, like, bumpers at the end of some of the songs he was playing that felt like their little signature. But it's like, don't play those. Like, if you know that there's going to be there, you got to stop even sooner, because it's like you're really putting the team at trouble where they can literally get penalized for that type of stuff. Not to mention, college football is about the music of the band. Like, you got to find moments. Obviously, you'll play songs on the in the big speakers. It's not like there's no place for it, but on the level of, like, you are risking costing Georgia State 15 yards at a time every time something like that happens. But also, just I didn't feel like it added much positive to the atmosphere. It's kind of like a nuisance. And from where I'm sitting, this might be a personal thing just because of where I'm situated, but he had a speaker, and it was going through the speakers of the stadium, which, for me, there was phasing going on. You'd hear it just clashing right on top of each other, like a second apart. And it might just be because I was in, like, the exact part of the stadium where, like, that's how audio works. But again, all for trying stuff. I think this is even an initiative that, like, Del McGee and the football side wanted to bring in. Like, they wanted to have the atmosphere brought and have a DJ come in, and I'm all for trying things, but at least brush up on the rules of football next time, because it was a detractor for sure last Saturday against Murray State. Said my piece. Yeah,
it was really weird, and I am fortunate that I was able to very quickly mute the broadcast. But it was just odd because, and I know that teams, especially bands, they really try to get away with playing as close to. I don't know what the specific rule is, but I know that teams generally stop playing when guys break the huddle. Like, they really try to go until players get set. I don't know if that's specifically a hard and fast rule or if that's just common courtesy. But, we were getting real loose with, some of these timings. It was honestly unsettling a little bit.
There was one that, like, there was music playing through an entire play. And I think it was like a pass breakup. And it's like, if there's an interception on a play where there's music playing, can the head coach of the team be like, where's the flag? Like, that directly impacted us.
And especially with the helmets, stuff. Like with quarterbacks having, like, the communication in the helmet, like, that's a head coach can easily complain about that in a way that's much easier to get the opposing team penalized now than if it was just, you have to look at signs.
So, we'll get in. We've gotten into, like, stuff Georgia State football needs to clean up. Like, it's early season for everyone. Like, everyone's putting in that film study, so just we've got stuff to clean up. I'm sure there's not been a perfect pod that we've ever done. There's not a perfect article I've ever written. There's always stuff I'll be like, I could have rewritten that. Always stuff to self-assess and work on. That's where the energy we're putting forward is this. It's not like a yelly thing. I'm all for the effort. I'm all for the trying, but you got to clean it up. You're going to start having some copycat defenses come in, have some responses to what's going wrong if you don't get it fixed. So as we move towards conference season, there's 2 weeks now before there's another game because they're on the road and then they're on bye. So got a time to get a good game plan and plan of attack together for the James Madison game early October. Best of luck with that.
Yeah, game day apps it's tough. We all get it. We did band, like, we've seen them. We're several years removed from Georgia State, marching band, but I understand what the team is trying to do and, the excitement they're trying to generate. So, and, like you said a couple of pods ago, there are good things that they are doing this year. So, it'll be fine.
All right, this is the point of the episode where, because we are recording this a day early on Tuesday, I have not 100% locked down the timing of the recording for our Ask the Expert for Vanderbilt. And so on the off chance that continues to not be set up, this is going to exist. You might hear it, and if you do, it means that nothing ended up coming of that, and we've gone 2 weeks in a row without it. That is on me. I'm hoping you don't hear this, because if I get it all set up and engineered like I'm hoping for, this is going to go away. No one's ever going to hear it again. David's going to forget he ever heard it. And we're going to move forward and put that interview right here in the middle before we ourselves dive into the Vanderbilt stuff. So the suspense is killing me. We'll find out together what happens. And without further ado, the next segment. All right, so Vanderbilt. 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 local. This is going to be on ESPNU, so another national broadcast. Vanderbilt, the vibes are incredibly high. This is number 20 Vanderbilt because, yes, the Commodores are ranked after a 3-0 start. They blew out Charleston Southern, then they did it to Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, and then last Saturday they beat a top 15 team in South Carolina on the road 31-7. So really good spot for the Commodores right now. They're led by Clark Lee, who is an alum of the program and whose 19-33 overall record doesn't tell the tale of the current trajectory of this Vandy program. But on the other side of things, Panther fans might remember, it might be the only thing they remember from last year, the 36-32 upset win that the Panthers pulled off in Center Parc Stadium last September, winning their first ever home game versus the SEC thanks to Ted Hurst's game-winning touchdown catch in the final 30 seconds. This game, as we are talking right now, late on Tuesday, has Vanderbilt as a 26.5 point favorite at most online books. Last year it was a 9.5 point spread in favor of Vandy in Atlanta, so bit of a difference there. And I think fair to say, because you really can't say Vandy's put a foot wrong so far this season, and with how shaky things are looking for some other teams in the SEC, like, you got Vandy fans dreaming on what might seem crazy going into the average year when you're talking about Vanderbilt football, but doesn't feel impossible. It feels like they've got a chance to have like one of those special seasons up in Nashville, and Georgia State is going to try and play spoiler to that two seasons running.
I'm going to ask you a question just because I'm going to go forward thinking for a second. Here are the SEC opponents in order for Vanderbilt. And I genuinely want you to tell me who you think the best team is right now. Alabama, LSU, Missouri, Texas, Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee.
I mean, Mizzou is more in the conversation than I thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. I think it's LSU because the defense has been really, really good, and you just, like, Nussmeier's and the offense is too good to be as bad as they've looked, I think.
I agree.
So I'd probably say LSU.
I agree with you, but the fact that you have to think about it, and the fact that given how well Vanderbilt has played, that you can kind of squint and see a really, really good, not just a good season here, a really, really good season based on where they've been and where some of the other teams have been. That to me, says that's a very good bar for them. What
would both of our unanimous answers have been at the start of the year?
Probably Texas.
Texas. Yeah. And it's absolutely not Texas right now because we're not really sure what's going on with Archer Manning. So, like, that shows you how the landscape has changed.
And it's only 3 weeks, Like, I think the thing that jumps out to me about this Vanderbilt team is the defense, I mean, South Carolina right now, they're not world beaters on offense. Like, that's just not their calling card. But you just held an SEC team to 7 points in their house at night. Like, this is a Vanderbilt team. I mean, have you seen no, of course you've seen their turnover numbers. Duh, you're doing a podcast on them. But, like, they are ridiculous at forcing other teams to turn the ball over.
Listeners might not have seen the turnover. Regale us.
That's fair. Last week against South Carolina, they were the benefactors of 4 turnovers. Just very sloppy play by the Gamecocks. The prior week against Virginia Tech, they've only forced 1, but I mean, that game was pretty in the balance for most of the second half anyways. So it's fine. And then in week 1 against Charleston Southern, they got another 2 turnovers, and they're doing it in both ways. They're, intercepting passes, they're, forcing fumbles, picking balls up. I mean, what sucks about this game for Georgia State, and I think back to the, our temperature check that we did like a month ago or so by now, we thought that this would be an interesting early slate for Vanderbilt, but they could come in with some confidence. At the very least, they're going to want to get back from last year.
I put the odds of them coming in 1 and 2 like Georgia State is pretty high. Like exactly. I was like, they could lose at Virginia Tech, they could lose at South Carolina, and they not only didn't lose, they blew those teams out. The one asterisk, I don't even want to call it an asterisk. I think it's unfair, and I think they probably win the game on the field anyway. South Carolina's quarterback, Lenore Sellers, didn't play most of that game. He got injured and left the game. I think they probably still win, but they might not win by 24 if he plays a full 4 quarters. So it's not to take it away, but more to contextualize that as far as that's maybe the one blowout that in 55 other times they still win, but maybe not by that much.
Yeah.
But you still went out and did it. And, how many times do we see, especially in college football, no matter how good or bad the backup is or how good a team is supposed to be, sometimes like the change up in a game, like you don't adjust. Maybe the backup comes in and does something better that you weren't prepared for because they didn't put it on tape because you were watching another guy all week. And that cost you. I mean, it certainly isn't a given that just because that happened. We've seen wacky stuff in college football where it's like, maybe it stays a 13-7 game for like, or 10-7 game, whatever, for like way longer than it needs to. The backup leads 1 scoring drive and you lose that one 14-10, and it's like, man, we really let that one go. So I really want to caution against totally putting that on like, I almost wish I didn't even say the word asterisk, because I'm not trying to make it an asterisk thing, but it is certainly the reason I would put it in the conversation is, I will say this, given that Sellers was not playing and the passing isn't really the strength of that team anyway. They lean more on his legs and try and establish the run. I do think Georgia State has the best passing offense that Vandy has faced so far. Charleston Southern, not a great FCS team. Virginia Tech, not a good football team right now. Brent Fry got fired. ODU ended his tenure prematurely. And, sandwiched between the second half against Vandy and the first half against ODU, they were outscored in their own building, 62-0 across 4 quarters. I mean, good night. But as last on the post-game show, I was kind of like, did you need to go to Ted Hurst that much? You did show a week before that you've got a guy that you can throw to for 172 yards, and I'm sure that those scars for Vandy fans still exist of, well, they have to learn a new number because he's not number 16 anymore, but number 16 in blue last year who put it on him.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about Sellers. I also think that they still win. It's probably not as comfortable. It's probably, they're going to have to move the ball a little bit better. Because if there's anything that you can take away from this Vandy game, they didn't really run it. Like the running number looks good, but I feel like they just had a really big run. And then you're looking at 36 rushes for 102 yards. And, that's not great, Obviously, it's same thing we said about the Ole Miss game. You can't take the 44-yard run out because you had the 44-yard run,
Also, SEC defense, South Carolina's got some big boys there. And
exactly, and it's just interesting for me. This game is going to come down to something that Georgia State 100% has not done this year, and they're going to have to play perfect. We've seen them play perfect in spurts.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, right? But what I mean by perfect is you're going to have incompletions. You're going to get sacked. Fine. But what I mean perfect is don't false start on the first play after a timeout. don't drop the opening kickoff and set yourself, like, you could get that ball out to the 25 if you're running, and like, yeah, we could talk about touchbacks, but don't drop the kickoff.
The special teams thing is going to keep snowballing because teams are going to keep seeing it and just saying, let's put this special teams unit under strain. When they've had these situations come up, they've not handled it well. Like,
yeah,
that's the biggest tape that you've put on that is the biggest concern. I mean, more than anything with either of the main units for the team, like, I'm sure there's tendencies you've got to fix offensively and defensively. But the biggest issue is that every coach is going to see this tape and just say, all right, special teams coordinator, bring me your best, wackiest special teams play. I don't know if this group can handle it. And so far, we haven't seen them handle many of these situations well. So I think that's a totally fair... Teams should do that. Until proven otherwise, teams should absolutely do that.
The fact that teams can just now outkick their coverage and still probably come up with a very good play is concerning if you're Georgia State. That's not what you want to do. I'm not looking for, Finley to be 400 passing yards and then the rush for 200 yards on the ground or anything like that. Obviously, that'd be lovely, but it's the stuff on the margins. You can't have 132 penalty yards. You can't do that. That's not going to fly. You can't be missing field goals where the, distance starts with a 3. And that goes for getting blocked too. I don't think Georgia State has really suffered from too many of the block issues. It's more just accuracy issues in general. But, you got to find a way to stop turning those types of things. It's got to go from being a negative to at worst neutral. Get it to neutral, and then we can maybe start talking about positives.
And keeping the special teams conversation going, they've given up some decent returns this year that stem from whether poor coverage or poor hang time on the punt. If you have one of those punts where it's a low hang time or whatever, if you have a gunner overrun his mark, Martel Height is going to house it. This is probably the best specialist returner that Georgia State will face all year. He's actually now a 3-way player. He was already a cornerback, he was already a special teamer, and now because of just the weapons he offers for the Commodores, they've found ways to get him on the field on offense. And they want to use him just an athlete that can beat the other team's best defenders down the field. But in the main role that he kind of shined in with the special teams, since this has been an issue, you talk about perfect. You're going to have to be perfect on just the punts being the right distance, the right hang time this game, or you might give up a touchdown. That's already been a bit of a warning sign anyway with some of these returns, but that goes double with this matchup. That's going to be something you're going to have circled. So I'm interested on that to see if they just have a plan to kick everything out of bounds. Wouldn't necessarily shock me. Wouldn't be a bad decision. But obviously it's no guarantee if you're kicking directionally that it goes as far as you want, and if you run the risk on that occasion of like a 19-yarder that goes off the side of your foot. So still going to have to be sound fundamentally to even put that plan together. But I certainly would recommend any game plan that does not involve kicking directly to him, giving him a lot of time before the gunners can get down there and get in his face, because that's asking for trouble in this one.
Certainly is. And I don't have a missed tackles stat because I'm not sure that anywhere that we get our stats from specifically calculates it.
There were 4 in the Murray State game per PFF college, so PFF tracks those, and I don't know if those are infallible, because sometimes you'd be like,
they're not.
I don't think that they give someone missed tackle. It's like, what was that for? But it was a lot better in this last game. Level of competition, grade on a curve, whatever. That seemed like a lot less of an issue. The reason to bring back the thing about the defense earlier, it just feels like they've improved on things that were worse for them at the start of the year. It just feels like week on week they have gotten better at the things they've needed to get better at. That was really a problem in week 1, and some of that's still lingering for the offense. Certainly a lot of that's still lingering for the special teams. And I think that's why I like the defense is you're seeing them put in those improvements to where how many big plays they give up in the passing game that will miss. They didn't give up but one play 20 yards or more against Murray State. So it's gotten better.
And I'm really hoping that that is not just the level of competition, that they are still able to, wrap up better. Because I don't think that guys are missing in ways that concern me. I think they were just missing, like that happens sometimes. So, continuing to progress there is going to do a lot for the defense. It's going to do a lot for the special teams. And then I don't know how I feel about how they've ran the ball so far this year. I feel like
they being
Georgia State. Yeah. Okay. I feel like it's kind of been
It's not
worse.
Meeting the expectations.
Yeah, it's been
we
worse. We
thought it would look a lot better
be.
than it already has. Like that we came in thinking the season just because of who they added. We didn't really know the offensive line, but you figured they'd kind of get it together, and you certainly wanted to be a more trustworthy unit on short yardage stuff, which, like, if you get in 3rd and 1s and 3rd and 2s in this game and you can't get that on the ground, then you're going to be asking for trouble. Like, this isn't necessarily your benchmark for how the season's going to go based on that, but if you want to hang in this game and you are able to stay ahead of schedule, you're going to need to be able to get your running game, and that's certainly not a given. Vandy's had a very good rushing defense through 3 games, and like you said, it stood out to you. I think that has been the thing that's taken a step forward from that maybe is giving them a chance when you're talking about these games down the road in SEC play. It feels like even though Clark Lee is a defense guy, it feels like the defense hasn't been leading the way they've maybe been hoping, and this year maybe they've got that. And so this is going to be another test for them. It's like you've played now the 4 games you will have been playing, 3 of them were good defenses, probably top half defenses in FBS, and you didn't do well enough against Murray State to make you feel like you're trending in the direction to overcome that.
And I want to, to that point specifically, they still hit 166 yards against Murray State. They still, were over 5 yards a carry. Those are very similar numbers to what they did against Ole Miss. It feels like there is a level of explosion in the running game that we haven't seen, and I'm not saying that every game needs to have some sort of 60-yard run or 40-yard run or whatever like that. It felt like they've just gotten good runs in spurts, and then there's times where they just cannot do anything in short yardage.
I think the common thread is it's not been blocked up great, because if you go back and look at Branson Robinson's 47-yarder against Murray State, he made some guys miss. Like, he made a smart cut. He was reading well, and you had some of the safeties crashing down, and he just kind of juked past them and had open space where they just occupied. Even Del McGee said, I forget if it was it must have been the post game. Someone asked about the touchdown Rashad Amos scored down the goal line, and he was like, we didn't block anybody. Rashad just made a nice move and got in the end zone. And it's like...
It's true.
Like, that is... Yeah, if you go back and watch, it's like he ran into, like, 3 or 4 Murray State guys, and just... There wasn't that much real estate he had to get through, and he's a tough runner. He got there. But, like, I think that is the thing. And, you go back and think of, like, the 2019 Georgia State team. That is the best rushing offense we've seen since this program's existed. I mean... the Seth Pages and the Destin Coates and Trey Barnett had, like, the Red Sea to run through on some of those big runs that they broke. And so
it was beautiful.
You want to have running backs that can make those kind of plays, and I think for what you've seen from Rashad Amos, he's looked good. He's looked able to break a 18-yarder that maybe wasn't going to be anything. Branson Robinson obviously had his first really nice run at Georgia State. DJ Murray's a guy that Del McGee just randomly shouted out, like, we need to get him on the field more. So I'm interested to see what happens there going forward. But you also want to have just bread and butter base run plays that you can get blocked up enough that you're getting 6 yards, and so you're setting up a 2nd and 4. And I think that's what's been missing. Is it feels a bit luck boxy when you're just getting it thanks to the superior abilities of your running backs, because that isn't something you can just count on week after week after week, especially when you're playing SEC defenses, as we're going to see with Georgia State playing Vanderbilt this Saturday.
And it's one of those things where you just kind of get one-dimensional, whether the game situation dictates it or not. If all your running backs are being tasked to make something out of nothing, then teams don't really have to honor you running the ball because, some teams will have the athletes to be able to say, okay, cool, I have a good enough front seven to cover you and get your run if we don't have to worry about blockers getting in our way. Like, your running back is just going to have to put on one of those level of performances, and if that's how we're going to get beat, then all right, you tip your cap, so.
And this is where probably bring back the quarterback thing. I do think Cameron Brown helps you there. Just that he offers more mobility is at least another number you have to count for in the run game. But we saw what they did at Ole Miss in the second half. It was a bunch of quick passes, nothing downfield, not that much of exotic looks as far as what they were doing on run plays or pass plays. It was just kind of like, let's get out of here. And everything matched. We don't have to rehash that again for like the 8th time at this point. But like, if they're going to do that in this game, we're not going to learn much. And then it'll be a bye, and then it'll be conference play. And so I really think you've got to find a way to just say, no matter what, in the fourth quarter, we're still going to be running our stuff. Whatever the score is at that point, certainly if it's still a game, don't give up on it. But even if it is like at the danger zone area like it was in the Ole Miss game, I think they got to keep at it because I think they still have to learn things about this offense. Like running quick screens and running passes behind the line of scrimmage just to get out of the game healthy is not going to help you at all because James Madison's next. And you need to see, even if you're putting that on tape, it can be for your benefit if you put another thing on tape that the team has to factor in rather than if they can just turn off 2 halves of football that you played because you didn't show them anything. I know coaches are always worried about putting their best stuff on tape, but this is a case where I almost think it would be to their detriment to say nothing of the competitive element of it and making sure you're going out and competing. And obviously, there's the other part of this. You beat this team last year. So what kind of message would that send? If you think this is a better team and you'd be punting on this game in this spot, even if they are also an improved team, and maybe they've got the upper hand in the second half in this one. So I think the coaches' mentality-wise and their approach will be telling, and maybe not in a good way, but I think you kind of have to just keep rolling the dice and see what you can do over 4 quarters just to take whatever positives you can at the end of this arduous month. Because you still got to be tilting up and looking forward and improving on stuff heading in to the bye week and then in the conference play in October and November.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, their season is still in front of them, but this is going to be an interesting week. I think it can be a better game than the Ole Miss one. Even with the way that Vanderbilt is playing right now, I do think it can be a better game than that. But it's going to be on them to stick in it and to not sandbag it. So
here's a note I'll say, and I want to pull up the actual quote that Clark Lee gave. His press conference was today. We've talked about this game since January. It's a really big one for us, and we want to play well. It's real important for our players to show up and play well. And it goes on from there, but just you're a Sunbelt team whose NCC team has like circled your game on the calendar. And, he talked about how basically last year's team needed to learn the lesson from losing a game like that. They didn't show up prepared for, they didn't practice during the week well enough for. And I think obviously he believes this team is built for it, and I think he's right as far as I think this is a good team. And if they do their stuff at home, they can take care of business. But it is worth just pausing and reflecting that, like, you have got an SEC team in this opponent in this situation where they are talking about their opponent like that, and it isn't Alabama. It's not the Georgia game. It's not Auburn. I mean, they've owned Auburn. Diego Pavia still owns Auburn. I don't know what the lease is on that. He might have a few years even after he graduates college to still own Auburn. It's talking about Georgia State, so there is something there in that. The other side of that being, there's a lot, certainly their fans would love to just keep running up the score, no mercy, get revenge and all that. They've got this game. They've got a home game against Utah State next week. Then they've got on the road at Alabama, and as you laid out, a bevy of games that they're going to want to win for their season writ large. And 8 wins, 9 wins, whatever. As much as they have like circled this game and everything, my only question is like, do they really care to run it up? Because I think it would probably be the smarter thing that if they're up, whatever, 31-7 in the fourth quarter, like they were against South Carolina, are they going to be prudent and just take Pavi out at that point? Because it's like, we need to get this guy through conference play and he's going to take a lot of hits because of the way he plays. Or do they keep him in and score a couple more times? I mean, we certainly saw Brian Kelly keep Jaden Daniels in a lot longer than we were expecting down in LSU in 2023. Lane Kiffin played the starters a long time in the Ole Miss game this year, so there's certainly a mentality thing, and I get all that. I'm just wondering if that plays a factor in whether ultimately Vanderbilt covers the 26.5, because they could play well. They could play well enough to cover that number, but at a certain point with what they've got in front of them, they might not care to, and so that's the other factor in this. Mentality just in the second half, big thing to watch for both sides.
I have a feeling they'll take the starters out, but Pavia will want to override that and stay in, personally.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess he does have a lot to say, and he does kind of define their team, and the decision might be made that it's like they're out for blood, in which case Georgia State's certainly going to have to play full 4 quarters to prevent a real bloodbath situation, but I'm just wondering. I mean, we'll all find out together on Saturday if that's the way the game's going. We'd be remiss, since we basically weren't on top of it last year, to not leave the outside possibility of wouldn't it be hilarious if they did win it 2 years in a row. And so we should voice that, however unlikely, just because we weren't talking about it last year, and it turns out it was very possible to happen. So
I think there's a path.
I don't know exactly what it looks like. Probably it involves spamming the turnover margin and just being way up and just taking care of mistakes. But I mean, the truth is, there's no reason to look at the way they played against Murray State and think that this is the week that they're going to be playing well enough to win a game like this. I don't think you have to put on the whole season based on the first 3 games and that like Murray State didn't go as well as you were hoping, but you'd be a total homer to go based on what we've seen of this team so far, what we've seen of Vandy, to expect it. But from a podcasting point of view and having to come back on these mics later, we might as well cover our bases and just be like, there are 2 ways this could go, in theory. And I think it certainly would mean something even if all they do is cover a very large number. Yeah, even if it's like you lose by 21. I still feel like, I'm not calling it a win, I'm not getting into moral victories and stuff, but like, especially with how the Ole Miss game did go there, I've mentioned it a 9th or a 10th time, you want to see some fight in this one, I think. So that's kind of where I leave it.
I think that's really the game plan, is just take care of the ball and let Ted Hurst kind of face another SEC defense and do what he did last year to the SEC instead of what he did in week 1 this year. And that's, I think if there was any value in just continuing to spam the Ted Hurst button last week, you maybe got him some. I am so being dramatic by saying the word confidence because he had a good game against Memphis. It wasn't like he was bad against Memphis, But after, like in the beginning part of the Memphis game, they were so worked up about how Ted Hurst didn't have a great game against Ole Miss, which that's, it's pretty easy to take away Georgia State's best receiver when they are having quarterback questions and the offensive line can't, necessarily block all that well. So I think the path is there to kind of just hang around like they did last year, get turnovers. I talked about Vanderbilt's ability to get turnovers. They've been a little bit loosey with the ball, despite what the scores have said. It's not crazy bad, but it's not like they've been perfect in that respect. So finding a way to get Georgia State off the field, continue to get those tackles for a loss, do what you did in the first half against Ole Miss in the running game. If there's a big run, don't give it up for a touchdown, but the other runs, make sure that you're able to, kind of contain guys and, see what happens. But I mean, it's gotta start with the special teams. I think that to me is the biggest reason why I can't sit here and say like, oh yeah, like it's going to happen.
And the penalties.
Yeah, that too.
Just that whole spiel.
Yeah.
I will say, bar none, the funniest outcome would be a first play long touchdown pass to Ted Hurst. Like,
it super would. It super would.
No matter how the rest of the game goes, that would just be the incredible tone setter of like, this guy did this to him last year, and immediately out of the gate it happens. It's like, oh my god, is this happening again? So also putting that one out there, that the wouldn't be hilarious starts with that.
I can see it. So, you know, it'll be a decent weekend. And you know, they've got the bye after that. So genuinely give it everything, because you've got 2 weeks to rest up. So, but I guess we can transition to our rest. No, just kidding. That's a bad transition. It's okay. We can leave it in. If Brady wants to pull up the results of last week's pick'em, even though I don't want him to, because I did terribly. Partially my fault, but also some of these picks I did actually make. So,
but in the grand scheme of things, Louisiana having 4 passing yards total against Missouri.
I need you to say that again, though.
Louisiana having 4 passing yards total against Missouri is like the picking a couple of wrong on accident pick'em form of college football performances. Yeah. Actually, probably worse than that, but I'm just following what we're going with here.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I had a feeling that one was going to not go great for you.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily know the level to which it was going to go not great for you. And I mean, that's the team I think everyone has just been wrongest on in the Sun Belt this year. Doesn't feel like a lock that they're going to make a bowl, which I had them winning 10 games personally. Yeah. So I am not saying this is like what other people got wrong. I got wrong. And they had the injury to Walker Howard, but they didn't look that great on offense even when he had been playing in game 1. So concerning. And they've gotta have it this week.
Absolutely do. I think, you know, as far as the rest of the results, I am curious as to what people really thought about Troy that led them to think that game was going to go the way that it didn't.
I just didn't understand what that line...
Yeah. Didn't make any sense to me at all either.
They also lost their quarterback, which factored in a bit. They didn't have it early on. They weren't having much success with Goose Crowder, but the backup, again, the passing numbers got real sketchy in a hurry for the Trojans, and there were some really disrespectful punts by Memphis. They punted like 3 times around the Troy 40. Yeah. Because it was like, we're just going to pin them deep. They're not going to do anything. And like, I'm sure Ryan Silverfield wishes they had finished some of those drives off, because it wasn't like a great offensive effort. And I do think Troy has one of the better defenses in the Sun Belt, but there was no world in which he thought he was losing that game by punting, which it's very rare that you see a plus side punt and you can rationalize it. It's usually like, what is this coach doing? He's got to be aggressive here. You only need to get 2 yards, but I can't dispute that this was the correct call in this case. And going forward, I guess what we learn about Goose Crowder's health might affect how people perceive the Trojans for the rest of the season.
It's one of those things where you typically flip the field because of your defense. You want to give them the longer, tail. They flipped the field because of their offense. They figured, all right, next possession that we get this, we're just going to have less yards to, move it. So, yeah, it was certainly tough.
I don't know why I was sweating ODU over Virginia Tech or Southern Miss over App State, because I was 50-50 on both of those. They're just kind of like, I wanted to make those calls because they're both underdogs, but it was like, I don't know, could go the wrong way. Did not. Certainly in ODU's case, that was never the wrong side. No. And App State had they had the weirdest pick six I've ever seen, like off a guy's leg into the DB's hand, and he took it like 98 yards to the house. But some other turnovers mixed in there, and I think Southern Miss has got a good football team. It affirms my priors, so I'm going to keep leaning on that. That I think that we're seeing, like, yes, in fact, Charles Huff can coach some football and get a team ready to go year one with kind of the same formula that worked for him just literally last year winning the Sun Belt. So, and they're going to be, at least for another week, tops in the Sun Belt just by default. I guess there is one conference game this week, but someone can join them, and they'll be tied for first, as right now they are lone first because only 2 teams have played Sun Belt games, and they are the team that won it.
Yeah, if I was App State, I certainly would be concerned. Even in the wins, Charlotte is looking like Charlotte, but they just don't look like you'd want them to. And the schedule, it ain't great. Boise State next week.
They got a bye this week, but then they go to Boise. Oregon State doesn't look all that good this year, and that's in Boone. So, the proverbial honestly, just to make it a Georgia State thing again. I feel like they have caught App State in that get right spot a bunch of times, and that's been part of the problem. And I think at the very least, they should be winning that Oregon State game at the beginning of the month, and so they won't be coming in on like a 3-game skid and like really in that here we go again. They're gonna win 45-16, and everything's gonna be hunky dory for the Mountaineers. So I think you'll avoid that if you're a Georgia State fan.
I agree.
think
I'm calling it now. Okay, that game. What's the date on that game? October 11th.
Yeah.
The line, Georgia State is going to be favored. It's not going to be high. Georgia State's going to be favored. I'm calling it.
All right. I won't agree to that. So I don't know. Can we put that in the?
We can
also be something in the correct incorrect thing.
Exactly.
I don't know. Logically, I don't know how we'll get there because I think App State will win a game between now and then. And if you just go based on you're playing Vanderbilt, you're playing JMU, the probability is Georgia State won't. But
close James Madison game is the way that it happens, by the way.
Okay, fair enough. All right. I guess I wasn't seeing the whole field on that one, but we'll keep track of that for sure. I can't keep racking up enough wins and getting enough distance on you in this thing, I guess.
I know. So we can pivot to this week. We've already talked about Georgia State, so that one is...
We both have Vanderbilt winning.
Yeah.
But we left the door open conveniently as a Georgia State pod. So
definitely. South Alabama Coastal, that's the one conference game for the week. I mean, one team's direction is going up. The other team's direction is going down. I'll let you decide which is which. Troy is on the road and facing Buffalo. This feels like a coin flip game for me, only because Troy's defense does seem to be better than we kind of expected.
Buffalo really almost lost against Kent State.
Yeah, and that's not great.
The quarterback thing, though. I've seen positive news that I believe Goose Crowder's had surgery now, and there is positive vibes that he will play again this season. But I would be surprised if it was this week, and Buffalo also has a good defense, and if your quarterback was like 10 of 29 the week before, it's just hard to think you're going to go on the road and beat a good MAC team who is probably one of the teams that, even though they did almost let it go against Kent State, one of the better teams in that league.
Yeah.
It's fun that this is happening.
It is.
It
certainly is. I like
geographically distant matchup.
I would be shocked if these two teams have played a ton of games against the other's conference, not just each other, but just the other's conference.
I think they played in a bowl game,
I
back
believe
when
so,
Neil
yes.
Brown was there.
Yeah,
and this is either the first game or the second game in a home and home.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they played in Troy last year. Maybe it's next year, but I mean that would make sense why they're on the schedule that way. G5's got to look out for G5s and all that.
Absolutely.
Another one of those. I guess we're doing basketball season early with all these MAC SBC challenge games, but Louisiana is at Eastern Michigan, who lost heavily to Texas State and lost their FCS game to Long Island.
Cajuns,
you got to do it.
Cajuns, you got to do it. You got to do this one.
Enough said.
Yeah, there's literally nothing else to say. You can't screw this one up because that would be really bad.
You almost got it home with Arkansas State. They gave Iowa State a game in Jonesboro, so that one that you accidentally picked almost paid off in your favor. But the Cyclones got it done. Arkansas State now heads to Kennesaw State, so they'll be coming to Georgia as Georgia State's leaving it. I think Arkansas State will get it done here. But there's been times where I think the Kennesaw defense looked frisky this year, and so they'll have something for Jalen Rayner, and it'll be a road game, and winning on the road is always hard no matter who you're playing, who you are as a team. So it'll be a good test for Butch Jones's boys, but we both have them getting it done. We both have James Madison beating Liberty on the road, which I think we would have maybe both had anyway a month ago, but in a lot different circumstances. I no longer think this is going to be all that competitive. Liberty is lost to Bowling Green. They were close to giving it away against Maine in the opener in their FCS game. Seems like they've taken a step back. He hasn't really had a great quarterback since Grayson McCall. And it's shown because the offense hasn't been, it's been kind of a steady, even when they run the table and go get ritual sacrificed at Oregon or against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, the Caden Salter shines coming off a little bit because he already lost his spot in Colorado. But JMU should handle business here. I guess it'll be more fodder for the quarterback controversy thing if they do not, because that's kind of the only way I envision this one not going the Dukes' way.
Yeah, pretty much. There are some specific plays where both of them are on the field and make Liberty guess who's going to actually play quarterback. But, yeah, I mean, I just don't think that this is going to be all that competitive of a game. It's college football, so it still could be. But with where James Madison is right now, and especially, they probably feel like they had an opportunity in that Louisville game.
They have verbatim said that. They basically said, Louisville didn't win that game, we lost it, which didn't make Louisville fans all that happy, but I can see where they're coming from. This isn't just like football guy being macho. Like, they had a real chance in that one.
Yeah, they certainly
And
did.
if they get to 20 points in this game, that might be enough. They might not have to score all that much to just certify their win.
I don't think Liberty has scored. Well, they lost. They have scored 20 this year, but it's versus Maine and Jack State. So,
but that might just be through conference play that might hold for James Madison. Like, they might be able to hold a bunch of teams they play under 20 points, and just whatever they get from the offense will be enough. But for the big picture things they're hoping for and stuff like beating Louisville, does feel like they got to get that sorted out down the road. But I think this week it should be enough just to lean on what's a very good Sunbelt defense. And going forward, certainly Georgia State's going to have to deal with that in the not-too-distant future. Next time we are talking about a Georgia State game, it'll be that one. So Marshall, Middle Tennessee's next one, and this is our first divergence of the week. I am going against the Thundering Herd. I've got Middle winning in Murfreesboro. I don't feel great about it because I don't think Middle Tennessee's all that great. Not sure the Derek Mason tenure is going as he would have hoped, but I just, with the win being against an FCS, losing to Missouri State, who is the FCS transitional, I just don't really know if I trust Marshall here on the road.
Yeah, I think I really, really wanted to, keep it Middle Tennessee State. I think everything that you said about Marshall makes sense to me. I just don't know if this defense is actually good. And while, yes, Marshall hasn't necessarily shown me anything, super impressive in that regard on offense, I just think that the possibility of them lucking into a win makes a little bit more sense than a Middle Tennessee State team that just does not seem like they're gonna score. Their season high mark is 14 points. They've hit 14 points twice. That to me is a problem. They played Austin Peay and they've played Nevada. Yeah, yes, there's the Wisconsin game in there, but I don't know. I really don't see how they're going to be successful if they can only score twice a game. That's just not a good recipe in college football. And
it would be good for the Sun Belt if, even in a downish year for the league and with one of the teams that might be one of the lowers in the standings, to beat a lower tier Conference USA team, just to kind of not let that narrative set in.
For sure.
As the case may be. Go more hyperspeed here. Both have Georgia Southern beating Maine. They got a nice win against Jacksonville State, who is one of the better teams in the league we're just talking about, Conference USA. Southern Miss over Louisiana Tech, we both have, but I just want to say hyperspeed because we don't have anything to really add here, but that should be a closer one. That's not like it's like the FCS where you're expecting a gimme. Probably Louisiana Tech improved this year.
Probably your game of the week of the Sun Belt variety.
Yeah, weird tilt, not a lot on offer. Texas State over Nichols, we both have. We do veer on the last Sun Belt game, though mine is just out of love and respect for the Warhawks. I have ULM going to El Paso, lighting up the Sun Bowl, beating the UTEP Miners, getting into good vibes of getting an FBS win this year in September. But I don't really know. It's toss-up. It's a close game. Projected to be pretty low scoring, so maybe that benefits ULM, but that's just me on the fly, just coming up with some rationale, just because I want to see him get it done. Rooting for ULM in general.
Yeah, I get that. it is hard to go to Texas and win, regardless of how good the teams are. So that's where I sat. Ole Miss and Tulane. This will be a good game. I believe we got this one in Oxford last year. Am I not mistaken?
This one is in Oxford. They played already in NOLA.
Okay.
So yeah, this one is in Vaught Hemingway.
Okay, I thought they doubled up, so that's fine. I think Tulane gets it this year. I think you're gonna. I know what you're gonna say when you go for your chance here, and that's fine because I was not fully aware of that. Full disclosure. Tulane just kind of looks like they are not back because they're always like this. They just look really good. They started the season off with that really good win against Northwestern. I know Northwestern isn't anything crazy, but still Power 4 team. And they've also got a good win against Duke. Again, not necessarily crazy, but this is going
a good win against their former QB.
Yeah, really good win. This is certainly going to be their hardest game of the season. I know that they've prepared for this one. I know they saw this one on the schedule when they came to spring camp and all that. So, and on Big Boy ESPN, I feel like we've seen Tulane, endear themselves very well in these situations, even if they came up short. But I think this will be the year that they get it done. Just because at the time when I made this pick, I didn't love how some of the things that I've seen from Simmons. I think he can be still a very good quarterback. He's just been a little inconsistent, and against a team like Tulane, you just got to play very clean. But
turns out Trinidad Chambliss played quarterback for Ole Miss last week in their win over Arkansas. Sounds like he's probably still going to be the guy, at least for the short term. And we saw him in the second half, and a great athlete. He was a Ferris State Stars. I believe they won the D2 Natty. So pedigree there. It might be a case of like Ole Miss is a better team than people thought they might be, and it's not for the quarterback that they were talking about all offseason. I mean, it's a tale as old as time that happens. Lou Gehrig made his hay, placing a guy called Wally Pipp. So sports history has chock full of stories like that. Certainly Tulane, if they win it, might row back in the fight against USF for the G5 spot supremacy, because even though they just lost to Miami, South Florida's win in Gainesville, I think, is enough that they're still in the lead as long as they take care of business in conference play. And I don't believe they play Tulane in the regular season. So if Tulane got this one, it would be an SEC win in an SEC building, and that would certainly go a long way. I do have Ole Miss winning just because I think if it's shootout-y, I just think that they're going to have more going on with Tulane. And I guess I'd like to be proved wrong, because it would be nice if we've got a legitimate battle, even though it's not a Sunbelt team going on. It would be nice intrigue to have the Tulane versus South Florida stuff really start hitting a fever pitch as conference play is getting started. But I do have Ole Miss winning. Then our last one, some Big Ten scrap, kind of the who's for real in that tier of college football that is trying to make the college football playoff. In Indiana's case, back-to-back years. Illinois heads to Bloomington to face the Hoosiers. I just think Illinois got a little bit of something about them. I think Brett Bielema's got the right mentality. Everyone expecting them to lose at Duke, and they end up winning by 26. And I just have this feeling that it couldn't happen 2 years in a row with Indiana, right? It couldn't happen 2 years in a row. And, if they're not going to do the thing, and this is the type of loss that could keep them out, they could still be like a 9-3, 10-2 team, but if they lose this one, it could be significant as far as them trying to stay alive in the college football playoff conversation.
For sure. Full disclosure, I have no connection to the school of Illinois. I am not an alum. I don't go there. I have been to Champaign only once, and that was 6 years ago. That's a lie. It was 8 years ago. That being said, I like what I've seen from Altmaier this year, their QB. He's back. He kind of just looks like a very solid Big Ten quarterback right now. And this game is super interesting to me because the Big Ten doesn't feel settled. And because of the way that their schedules work, like there's a lot of room for kind of variance here. Illinois plays Ohio State and Indiana plays Oregon, but that's it. So this game is kind of an interesting barometer for, at least two of the better teams, I think, in that conference. But then for these two teams specifically, like you said, for kind of vying into that, stamping their candidacy for the lower levels of the college football playoff, hey, one of them could run the table and, actually win the Big Ten and, get a first round bye and all that. I'm not calling that or anything like that. But, I've really liked what I've seen out of Illinois, regardless of opponent. I mean, they're playing lights out, 38-0 against Western Michigan. That's not something that Illinois football does, Same way we said that with Indiana last year. And I think that, they really do seem like they love playing for Coach Brett. The players, they look like they're having fun in a way that I follow a lot of Chicago people. So there are a lot of Illinois alum that I follow. The way that they have been talking, they've never seen Illinois football like this in their lifetime either, So this is going to be a very good game. It is a pity that it is, crossed at the same time that Georgia State is playing. So you and I certainly will not be able to watch it until the next day if it's going crazy.
0 eyeballs.
0. But it is certainly one of the better games on college football schedule this weekend. Mostly because of just what the narrative potential is. It'll be the same regardless of who wins, but there's some interesting storylines that could come out of this one.
So you're picking
Indiana.
Okay.
I like the home team.
You're picking Indiana.
Yes. After all that, I am picking Indiana.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't have another spreadsheet situation.
No.
I'm going to start having to stage an intervention at this point.
Really quickly, I know I just said all those glowing things about Illinois, and I agree with them. I feel like you got to lean on the team that has, quote unquote, done it, if you will. So, and Indiana did it last year. So,
Coach Sig, smoke him if you got him.
Yep.
But also shout out Dan Ellington, assistant wide receivers coach for Illinois. It'd be a nice moment for him if they get the win on the road.
So random, by the way. I love college football, man.
Hashtag relationships.
Exactly.
Matter.
Everybody's here. Everybody's there. Everybody's everywhere.
We'll be back here next week. Sunday, in fact. Travel schedule abiding, as I will be there in Nashville. And we think we've got a game plan for getting a post-game show out. Subject to change, subject to life getting in the way. But that should be out. And hopefully it's something you want to listen to. Hopefully the game stays within that 26.5-point spread, because otherwise maybe won't be the most entertaining listen, most entertaining game. But Georgia State can only hope to do what they did last year. And with this being one of the 3 teams that beat last year, I guess it's something you can hang your hat on. Looking forward to this game in Nashville. Looking forward to getting out there. Looking forward to you listening to this podcast next week when we're breaking it all down. So thanks for listening to Thursday Night Podcast again, and we will catch you next time.